What if I told you the AAA studio responsible for Destiny and Halo were going to make an extraction shooter? That this shooter is set in a sci-fi universe and built with the goal of making what's normally a hardcore niche game into something that's accessible to the average gamer. And around the same time, a non-AAA studio was also making an extraction game set in a sci-fi universe with the goal of targeting the same audience. And if maybe 6 months ago I said that AAA studio would likely crush the obvious direct competitor, you'd likely say, it's a reasonable statement. But if I said that today, you'd probably laugh at me. Let's take a look at what exactly happened to flip this situation on its head. Now before I get truly rolling, I'm going to Tarantino this sucker and start at the end and then loop my way back here. My ultimate hope is that both of these games, Marathon and Arc Raiders, succeed so well that they attract audiences that previously wrote off extraction shooters, and those audiences cross-pollinate to the point where not just these games succeed, but give opportunities for others to try their own versions. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I figure since there's going to be a lot of criticism to follow, I'd start with the idea that I'm doing so in good faith. Now that we've had the end, let's go back to the beginning. Having followed, tested, and covered a wide variety of extraction shooters over the years, I feel like I can say with some authority that both Marathon and Arc Raiders have potential for a huge impact on the extraction shooter space. You see, despite what way too many large content creators say, there are not that many extraction shooters. Now, I've beaten this topic to death, so if you want a detailed, nuanced presentation as to why that take is horribly wrong, you can check out the links in the description. But the short version is, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but you cannot call everything with an extract mechanic an extraction shooter. And unless you like milsim games, there's barely any on the market today. Now, I personally believe there's a huge hole between Hunt Showdown and games like Escape from Tarkov. A space where I believe the average gamer can endure the harshness of the extraction shooter genre, but only if it's done in a way that is completely approachable, likely done in a sci-fi setting that skips all of the trappings of modern day combat systems. Having played Arc Raiders back in 2023, I knew then what everybody knows now. This will most definitely be a game that can land in this space and do well. Embark Studios kept a lid on things for years, and so did Bungie. We got very little in the way of information on either game for what seemed like forever, and for various reasons, many people even speculated on whether the games would even make it to market. A reasonable assumption given all of the titles that have failed before they even got going or immediately out of the gate over the last couple of years. A few other titles were having tests and early access releases, but few looked like they would fit into this gap within the genre. Many continuing to chase the shadow of Tarkov, with the exception of Exoborn. Without a title that attracts the masses, the genre will always be regulated to the niche hardcore space. Many have tried, but for various reasons have failed to stick the landing. Given what I've seen in recent tests, it looks like developers, for the most part, finally began to understand what made the extraction shooter genre work. The future looks like it's full of potential, but the thing about potential is that it's not real until it's manifested into reality. Everything came to a head on April 6, 2025 when Bungie dropped a trailer for their upcoming in-game reveal event. Now, I say event because it was way more than just a test or a trailer. They created all kinds of online events for the community to interact with and decode. There was a massive press-style stream event, the reveal of the first in-game footage of the game, the announcement of an alpha test event, and a full release date. This was to be revealed on April 12th, and the alpha test was set to begin 2 weeks later. For various reasons that we'll get into later, the reaction to everything that was seen was at best mixed. The test was meant to be under NDA, but I believe due to the reactions, Bungie saw fit to lift the NDA. Then on April 15th, Embark announced that it was having a tech test, and for the first time there would be no NDA starting on April 30th. This announcement came in the form of a 1 minute and 10-second video, and later on April 28th, a trailer for the tech test was released, being roughly of the same length. Now, aside from some Discord announcements in terms of marketing, that was it, the relevance of which I'll get into later. Now, as of the time of this recording, both tests are done, and unless you're living under a rock, you've no doubt noticed the massive difference in chatter when it comes to the responses of both of these games. Marathon has gotten a collective meh at best, and there's absolutely no shortage of videos praising Arc Raiders from top to bottom. It would be easy to showcase the games themselves side by side as a reason why their reactions differ and just move on. But I think there's a lot more to it than that, and there's a large opportunity in discussing what goes into making a game successful. With that being said, it's really not up for debate which of the two games looks more complete or polished as of the last tests. but it would be overly simplistic to say that that's why there's a difference in reactions. Marathon's perception was already struggling before Arc Raiders came along, and I think Bungie had a lot to do with that. And the reason I'm even comparing them is because games are not released in a vacuum, and oftentimes competition in the market determines success regardless of how good or bad your product is. So let's start off with how each game framed its so-called reveal. Arc Raiders has had tests under NDA going on for close to 2 years, and before then had a lot of time to build assets prior to its focus switch away from the co-op looter shooter. Aside from very small, infrequent in-game engine trailers, there was no real exposure to the game. Much of its subreddit was left scraping investor and shareholder calls just to get a shred of information, and to this day we still have no solid release date. So when the test dropped, it was very much a case of under-promising and over-delivering. Expectations were never set, so the product just spoke for itself. Even if Arc Raiders didn't knock it out of the park, which they did, the bar was set so low that it would have exceeded expectations. Now let's compare that to Marathon. For starters, Bungie has baggage. Like it or not, fair or not, they will always be judged for the previous work the studio has done. A lot of effort was spent in hyping up the reveal event prior to people even getting a hold of the game, flying big name creators out to play the game while creating a hype video around that event as well. And when the reveal happened, the alpha test date would be 2 weeks from then, and then the full release date set for 5 months later. These are all significant signals that are being sent to all the eyes watching. The eyes that Bungie went out of the way to attract. For starters, the release date being so soon signaled that Bungie believes the game will be ready by that time, effectively rendering the alpha test little more than a marketing activity. Now I know game development isn't a linear process, but I would challenge anyone to tell me that the Marathon we saw in the test was anywhere close to release ready. I think that particular fact makes people nervous. Had Bungie been low-key about the alpha test and kept the release date nebulous, it would have signaled that they are aware of and open to changes that need to be made. And the changes that are getting people's attention aren't trivial, it just needs another graphical pass level of change. Some of them are fundamental game design choices that aren't easy to change, so there's very little faith they'll be addressed, let alone changed entirely. With that said, let's go over some of those things, but before we get into that, if you've made it this far, you should consider subscribing. I plan on putting out consistent content on Arc Raiders once it comes out, so you can keep a lookout for that. Thank you so much for your consideration, and now back to the video. One of the major issues that has been brought up consistently is the fact that Marathon has hero character mechanics. Now, there is a laundry list of reasons as to why these do not work in extraction shooters, and I go into all of them in the video linked in the description, but I can very quickly demonstrate my point by highlighting one of the most consistent things Arc Raiders is criticized for: character customization. Extraction shooters heavily lean into the idea that you plan out your loadout and manage the risk levels you're engaging in with how much you bring into the raid. Now, with both of these games trying to streamline systems, this portion is significantly more simplistic than other titles. You're not choosing chest rigs, how many or what kind of magazines, different types of ammo, or 14 different attachments for your gun. So a lot of the customization gets pushed into the cosmetic realm and is highlighted a little bit more. Even though Arc Raiders has a wide, but albeit not very deep, variety of skins to customize your character with, these skins are full bodysuits with minimal variances to tweak with. This game has no classes, no heroes, or anything else to limit your playstyle, and even though this is purely cosmetic, this still consistently makes the list of things it gets criticized for. By contrast, with Marathon you have to select a hero, which means you're not just locked in on the look, but effectively your base gear set as well. Yes, I'm sure there will be additional skins and you can change the rest of your loadout to suit your playstyle. But for proper game design, all skins need to be close enough to the original character profile in order for you to identify what character you're fighting. And despite being able to build out the rest of your loadout, you risk not being synergistic with your character. In many cases, you're going to change your character or your loadout to suit the other. You don't have the option to run nothing or mix and match abilities or traits, which would have been ideal. This is not the kind of thing you can turn around in 5 months. These abilities have been tuned, balanced, and other parts of the game have been designed around said abilities. Characters that have high movement value are great examples. I am sure portions of the map have been designed with this in mind, ensuring that mobile characters get value, but not so much so that the other characters aren't viable. And you may be thinking, that's not necessarily true, and you're right, it's not necessarily true, but it should be, and if it isn't, Bungie's got bigger problems. Another critical feature that Marathon is lacking is a solo/duo queue. A ton of players play these games solo or with just another friend. Gray Zone Warfare ran into this issue, which heavily affected how their helicopter system was able to be utilized. Any game in this genre that doesn't or didn't have strict lobby sizes struggles with this. The only exception I can think of is Hunt Showdown, which uses incredibly accurate matchmaking to level out the skill differences between group sizes. Coming out of the gate with such a staunch position on trios and the map being built for trios is incredibly short-sighted, which makes Arc Raiders' system shine that much more by comparison. They don't have strict lobby group sizes, but it goes out of its way to make it pretty close. It's not guaranteed that you'll only be with other solos, duos, or trios, which is even better because it still remains a mystery on how many enemies you're dealing with. This helps maintain the tension the genre needs to succeed, as well as having some fairness for various group sizes. And then you have proximity chat. Given the PR spin that Bungie has put out regarding its reasoning for not having it, and for the sake of those of you who don't know, it's either because of toxicity or because of regulations going on in Europe regarding online speech laws. Regardless of whatever reasons Bungie is dealing with, it's the same for every other extraction shooter, and they managed to do it. Now, I'm almost positive someone high up the food chain who has nothing to do with game design made whatever call they had to make in order to get this to happen. But, and I'm only going to try to say this respectfully, this is either a result of laziness, cowardice, incompetence, or a combination of two or more of them. Pick whichever of these offends you the least. It doesn't matter who made the decision though. Ultimately, Bungie as a whole is left holding the bag. Proxy chat is a staple of the genre and has been since the beginning. Search out positive trending Arc Raider clips and a big chunk of them are going to be trending because of the proximity chat. These features on their own normally wouldn't garner much praise for Arc Raiders, but because Marathon serves as such a comparison, audiences see in real time that these features aren't just window dressing, they're standard features for a reason. But aside from marketing strategies and gameplay features, there are core differences in values which I think reflect in the final product, which contributed to the differences in reactions. Now, I think I'm going to have a lot in common with Marathon fans when I say this. It has such a rich amount of story to draw from, it almost feels like a waste making it into an extraction shooter. And this is coming from someone who loves extraction shooters, thinks there should be more of them, and especially the kind Marathon is trying to be. One of the most common defenses I see of Marathon is coming from individuals who are already invested in Marathon's lore. These defenses are usually based on their ability to siphon story elements from the game. Here's the issue. Story-based games are often best experienced through one playthrough. Now, of course, you can absolutely play through these games multiple times, but the initial experience of the story is mostly already gone. You can only experience something for the first time once, and that's when the story has most of its impact. Successful extraction shooters, however, operate on a compelling, repeatable scenario. Granted, the variability of said scenario is something to be desired, but that framework in which that variability is experienced is static. Point being, all of the different extraction shooters I've played and the different communities I've interacted with, you would be hard-pressed to find someone who plays these games and lists the story as one of the top 5 reasons they play that game. And I would like to point out, wanting to quote, be immersed is not the same as a story-driven motivator. It's more of a wanting to not be reminded that they're playing a game as opposed to following a narrative. There's a difference. With all that being said, trying to market an extraction shooter using the story as a main selling point is not going to net a good return on investment. And one of these games is leaning much harder than the other on this. Let's take a look at 2 different trailers. Here we have an 8.5-minute Marathon story trailer. It was written and directed by Alberto Miego and animated by his studio Pinkman.tv. He's known for his work on Love, Death, and Robot series, including the critically acclaimed episodes The Witness and Gibardo. He also served as an art director for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. The voice actors are all fully credentialed, some of which you'll recognize based on what media you've consumed. It looks so epic and glorious. It honestly looks like $1 million, but that's probably because it cost them that much, if not more, to make. It has universal praise, but as one commenter pointed out, you can't play a trailer, which sums up the massive gap between the story trailer and the game when it's being played. Now, let's compare the Arc Raiders Tech Test 2 trailer, which has been by far the most produced trailer they've ever put out. This trailer is pretty close to just 1 minute long and largely done with the in-game engine. By all available information, it was done in-house, and the voice actors are even suspected of being AI generated. And yet, of all the things Arc Raider has been called, not immersive is not one of them. Now, you could say what Marathon is doing is more world building than narrative driven. That may be true, but I think it misses the point. Extraction shooters are inherently a PvP experience with mechanics and systems that may be themed around the setting, but ultimately whose goal is to further the gameplay loop. Nailing the gameplay will net significantly more benefits than world building in this genre, and if you're trying to attract players that are way more interested in experiencing the world, they're going to be pulled out of it when they're getting sent back to the lobby over and over again by players engaging with the extraction shooter systems. To be clear, you don't necessarily have to choose between gameplay or narrative like it's a zero-sum scenario. My point is mainly to highlight the clear difference in the outwardly displayed intention and resources placed into these factors between the two games, offering this as a possible explanation as to why the quality of one factor severely outpaced the other in the case of Marathon. The alternative explanation would be less generous. When Marathon started ramping up, I was genuinely concerned for Arc Raiders. As someone who has been invested in this title for years at this point, I was convinced they had to beat Marathon to the market to even stand a chance. Now, Arc Raiders clearly is in a position to be the face of the extraction shooter genre, taking it to the mainstream, while Marathon, with respect, looks like a half-baked indie game. But don't get it confused. I think both games can thrive, and I hope they do. My ultimate hope is that both of these games, Marathon and Arc Raiders, succeed so well that they attract audiences that previously wrote off the extraction shooter genre, and that audience grows to be large enough to cross-pollinate to the point where not just these games succeed, but give opportunities for others to try their more unique takes on the genre. Games like Hunger, Sand, and Active Matter, for example. I would love to be making a video detailing how both games have different flavors to offer audiences and are able to succeed at the same time. But if I'm being honest, at this point, I believe Bungie needs to seriously consider delaying the game and going back to the drawing board. I'm not sure what that drawing board's gonna say, but I sure hope it ain't wing it. If you take issue with anything I've said or think I've missed something, leave it down in the comments. I read them all and respond to most. If you've made it this far, I'd like to ask you to hit that subscribe and notification button. I'll be putting out a ton of Arc Raider content as the game releases, and hopefully on Marathon too, depending on how that goes. Discord and Twitch links down below. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and good hunting.